But as it pertains to men's basketball, everyone I know has questions now about Bruce Weber's future. And before I get to what Gene Taylor had to say about it, here's really where I'm at. It is fair. It is absolutely fair to bring up that Bruce and this team were in a bad position to deal with the hardships of 2021. Like the difficulties of 2020 and 2021 with the pandemic. That was going to, like, K-State was in a worse position to deal with that than a lot of places because of the youth on the roster. Not a good time to be turning over your entire roster. Now, having said that, that's not created in a vacuum. It's not like K-State was just dealt that deck of cards or that hand. No, that hand was, K-State put themselves in position to have that hand by the disaster that was last year and losing all of those players. So you don't get just a total free pass from that. Okay, that's part one. Part two is, while saying that, hey, injuries and COVID have played such a key role in what's happened here, that has still dug you a giant, massive hole that the program needs to dig out of. And it doesn't matter how the hole got there. It doesn't matter who picked up the shovels. It doesn't matter what shovels were used. It doesn't matter. What matters is you have to pull yourself out of that hole. The hole being now 2 years going where you're going to be either last or next to last in the Big 12. And, I mean, right now, the way that it's looking, it's going to be 4 Big 12 wins in 2 years. Iowa State will probably get added and tacked onto the back end of that schedule. So maybe 5 or 6 Big 12 wins over the span of 2 years. But that's wretched. It's really bad. And now you're taking demoralizing losses where what does it do to the confidence of these guys? How do you pull yourself back to being a winning program when you've gone through 2 years of being this bad? That hole has to be climbed out of no matter how it is that you got down there. And I have serious, serious doubts about Bruce Weber and this staff right now being able to do that pulling out of the hole. I understand that they dealt with some tough luck to get thrown down in there, but they have to pick themselves out of it. And it is hard to see that happening now because Bruce has done this before, right, where things seemingly bottomed out and he came back with Dean Barry and Cam. But Dean Barry and Cam had a year with Wesley Awundu and DJ Johnson, and they won 5 Big 12 games that first year. They were really competitive, and they had a bunch of close losses. They were very competitive throughout that year. It was not anywhere near this. It was not anywhere near this. And that was years ago with a core that we now know to be the core that won a Big 12 championship and went to an Elite Eight. No such guarantees here at all. And it just feels like this is headed toward the end. It does. It just feels like this is headed toward a situation where it's going to be you're too far gone, and there needs to be some new kind of juice here. And I know I don't have to tell any of you listening that twice. I'm not going to come out like I just don't. It's not my style to come out and like pound the table and be like, I demand that somebody is fired here. Heads must roll. That's not what I'm going to do. But I will tell you that I have serious, serious doubts that this coaching staff would be capable of pulling the program out of where it's at right now. And, you know, you can say, well, there are 7, 8, 9 games left in Big 12 play. I apologize. I should know that exact number. There are blank number of Big 12 games left in the league schedule. 9, I think. 9 if you count a Big 12 tournament game. They could win 4 or 5 of those and have you feeling different. Yes, they could. But right now, they're not even competitive. So I'd have to see them be competitive with somebody before I would entertain the thought of them actually winning a Big 12 game. I mean, the next 4 Big 12 games are against Texas, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, and Kansas. All pretty good teams, all postseason teams, all tourney teams. And raise your hand if you have confidence that K-State will be moderately competitive or threaten to win one of those games. My hand is not up. So it feels like it's going to get worse and continue to get worse before it gets any better. And by that point, man, we're just talking about it's just too much. It's just too much. Will it happen is now the next question. Okay? Will it be time for a change? That is the better question to ask them. What do I think? And again, what I think is I have serious doubts about Bruce Weber and this staff being able to pull out of where they're at right now. Gene Taylor made some comments to the Manhattan Mercury and then walked it back seemingly to the Kansas City Star and Wichita Eagle with Kellis Robinette. The crux of the issue here is that Bruce Weber is owed a $2 million buyout if K-State were to fire him before May 1st. I've been asked that question. Do you wait until May 1st when it goes down to $1 million? No, you don't, because that's half whatting it, half rear-ending it. I don't know if I can say the A word here. Not sure, but you don't want to do that because then you're missing out on potentially a whole cycle's worth of coaches. That's just you can't. You have to be either all the way in or all the way out. The $1 million would be inconsequential to the impact it would have on your program long term on that front. So it would happen before then. It's going to cost you $2 million. And is that money there during a pandemic? I think this would not be nearly as much of a conversation piece if we were not in a pandemic era where the athletic department has dealt with furloughs and a lot of people have taken pay cuts. And obviously it's a time where everybody wants to see, in an ideal world, fiscal responsibility. But let's get to the comments here of Gene Taylor. So in the Manhattan Mercury, Gene Taylor said, this is the Mercury. I'm going to quote the Mercury first here. The Mercury, Ryan Black's article says, barring something entirely unforeseen, specifically a situation not involving on-court results, Weber will return as the Wildcats head coach next year, regardless of how the team finishes this season. Quote, now this is Gene Taylor, quote, that's our intention, Taylor told the Mercury in a phone interview Saturday night. So that got people worked up. Now, first, let me say that stating it's our intention to have Bruce Weber be back next year as the head coach is different than saying Bruce Weber will be back next year as our head coach. There is already some wiggle room built into that, but I understand how people would read that and freak out. That interview was conducted on Saturday night after the A&M game. This interview with Kellis Robinette of the Kansas City Star and Wichita Eagle was conducted on Sunday. This is how Kellis phrased it. Quote, his plan is to let the season play out and then discuss the future of the program with Weber afterward. Quote, there is still a lot of basketball left to play. The players are going to continue to work hard. I will always evaluate all the way through. I don't stop evaluating. Let's see how we finish the season and go from there. So a couple of things here. One, obviously it's a different tone. A different tone, albeit I would say just slightly, but a slightly different tone than what the Manhattan Mercury comments were. They came later in the timeline. So it stands to reason that you could say this was walked back a touch, probably after seeing what the public reaction was. That would just be my opinion here on it. That's not really inside info, but my opinion. And then I'll throw this nugget at you as well. Typically, every other Monday on my radio show in Manhattan, we have Gene Taylor on as a guest. Well, it was scheduled to be his day, and when I reached out through the channels that I typically do reach out to, not directly to Gene, just because of the way it's worked out with this, I'm typically going through somebody else. I was given the answer that he had a meeting and would be busy, and I said, well, hey, can we tape early? Can we do it on Tuesday? And the answer I got was probably next week. We'll shoot for next week. So I think I'll just let you do the math on that. You draw your own conclusions from that. But I think my hunch would be here there is an element of, hey, let's let this all blow over a little bit and then get back at it. Now, Gene's never somebody that's really shied away from this, and clearly he didn't shy away from the first two interviews, so I don't say that to be like, hey, they're really trying to dodge things here. But I think after seeing how those comments really stirred things up, it was like, let's just back off and not add an extra distraction to Bruce Weber. That to me is really what this is about. Because one thing I can tell you is that, like, Bruce, if he is going to be fired, it's not going to happen during the season. There's a lot of respect from the athletic department to Bruce Weber and who he's been as a man and how he's handled himself as the coach. He's done things the right way and that he has accomplished a lot for the school. So there's a part of that here. And the problem is, if you're an athletic director here, you are, when the program is this bad, going to have to answer some of those questions, especially when you've been as open as Gene has been. But it's kind of a no-win situation when you have to make those public comments, because if you're an athletic director, you can't come out and say, hey, this is not good. We are really considering this behind the scenes. You just can't do that because, one, if you respect the coach, you're not going to do that to the coach. And two, you don't want that to be your reputation as an AD, because then what's the next coach going to think? Hey, if I start losing, the athletic director is going to... You don't want to be Jerry Jones, right? I mean, that's basically the best analogy I can give you, where Jerry Jones is like, if you're not winning, he's going to go out and say something to the Dallas media about it. You don't want that to be your reputation. There's not a whole heck of a lot for Gene to gain, really, by saying anything other than what it is that he said. I think the only change that I would make is I would have led with the comments that came to Kellis. I would have just left it more in an ideal world. The first interview you say, look, we'll evaluate at the end of the season. I'll talk with Bruce. That's what we do every single year. Because I know that is what they do every single year. It's not a lie, and you've just covered all your bases there. You're not saying, hey, the guy's going to be back. You're just saying, hey, it's the same as it is every single year with every coach. We'll evaluate, and you just kind of kick the can down the road. So I would imagine if Gene could go back and do it again, that's probably what would happen. And the big picture conclusion here is this. Like I said, comments were walked back. That's typically not going to be a great thing, I think, if you're the coach looking at that, being like, oh, boy, okay, well, the comments got less strong in support of me as the timeline progressed and we saw what the reaction was going to be. And also, there's no real advantage to Gene coming out and being honest about what may or may not be happening behind the scenes, so I wouldn't freak out too much about it right now. I probably buried the lead here, because really what I would just tell everybody out there who is freaking out, don't freak out about it right now. If there's going to be a move made, a move will be made and something will get done. It's not going to hinge. You don't need to worry about what comments are being made right now. And the proof that I would give you to that, even if you're someone that would be skeptical and be like, well, John, you can say that all you want, but I don't trust Gene Taylor. Well, let's look at how the Bill Snyder situation played out. In 2018, Gene Taylor was saying all the right things as that was coming to a head. Saying all the right things in support of Snyder and like, hey, we'll evaluate, we'll talk to him about what he wants to do at the end of the year, even though it was becoming increasingly obvious that the program was getting to the point of critical mass, to the point of a change needs to be made. And what happened? Into the season got there. There was a week long of time where Snyder was deciding and meeting with Gene Taylor, and then at the end, it comes out that Bill Snyder's retiring and, oh, by the way, still getting that $3 million. So again, I'm going to have to ask you to draw your own conclusions there as to what happened. I would just say that I think there was Bill Snyder, as stubborn as he was and as much as he always wanted to be coaching, I would just say that you combine that with the fact that he got $3 million, there were at least some spirited conversations, I'm sure, that took place about how all that went down. And to me, that proves something about having a good pulse on when the time is right, when something needs to happen, and getting it done. Because that was a far more delicate situation than even this. If we're talking about dealing with a $2 million buyout in a pandemic, there is some delicacy to that, but it is not the delicacy of what happens here when your icon coach is on the verge here of needing to hang it up. So that's what I would tell you. I know it sucks to hear, like, patience. It's kind of like with the pandemic, like, patience, where we're close and hopefully by summer. I know it sucks to hear all that, but patience. And if things keep going the way that they do, I think it will be a very difficult situation to try to bring Bruce Weber back. Because, listen, the fan base is just, it's hard to watch the team. I know you're all apathetic about it now. I don't even know if it's like angry at this point. It's just a lot of apathy, and that quite frankly is about the worst thing that you can have if you're talking about a basketball program. So anyway, it's a sad, crappy state of affairs right now, unfortunately. And I do feel look, I will say this. As someone who hated the Bruce Weber hire when it happened and spent a lot of time worrying too much about hating on him when I was young and in my early 20s, Bruce Weber has always been great to me. He's a really nice guy. I think very highly of a lot of guys on that staff, man, like Shane Southwell, Jermaine Henderson, Chris Lowry. They're great dudes. I feel for everybody. They have accomplished a lot here at K-State, and in many circumstances, they've taken undue crap from the fan base. Just undue, unfair criticism and discounting of their accomplishments. Now is a time where criticism is legitimately very, very fair, and I just feel for them because they're getting buried by so much of it right now, and things are just not turning around and not getting better. I feel for the kids. I feel for the guys like Mike McGurl. boy, he was on the Zoom after the Kansas game. He was asked, like, what do you guys need to improve here? What do you need to get better? And he just said, I don't really know what needs to get better. We just got to do some soul searching. And it's like, because what do you say? I mean, like, everything needs to improve. Everything needs to get better. So I feel for everybody involved here, but it does seem to be everything is pointing to the direction of this is going past the point of no return.